Namaskaram, hi everyone and welcome back to the MERN Stack project series. In this video, we're going to be creating here a high-level authentication system using MongoDB, Express.js, React.js, and the Node.js. So let's have a look at the demo application first, then you can realize that what we are going to be cooking on here. So that's the demo applications. Let's go on the register here for creating the new users. Let's click here the name sections and give it here a name. Let's give it here my name, Mishu Dhar Chando. And then give it here one email. Let's give it here one dummy email. Let's say chando@gmail.com. Okay. And then give it here on passwords. Let's say 123. Click on sign up. And you can see password length must be at least 4 characters long. Let's give it here passwords 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Click on sign up and user registered successfully the toast, and it will automatically redirect it to the login page. Now let's give it to the mail. Let's say chando@gmail.com and give it here the password. Let's say 1234. Click on login. You can see embedded email or passwords. Let's also give it here 12 the wrong Gmail. Click on login. User does not exist. Now let's click on here and give it here the actual Gmail and the passwords 123456. Click on login. And then you can see user logged in successfully. Now you can see your shopping cart. Okay, that you can see it is directly coming from the backend server. You can also see the username Mishu Darchando, and you can also click on logout button, and you can see the user is logged out. And if I try to accessing the home page, and you can see here redirected in 4 seconds, 2 seconds, and you can see here it is redirected to the login page because you are unauthorized users. So in this video, we're going to making here these full applications from scratch using React.js, MongoDB, Express.js, and the Node.js. So in order to creating here this project, you need to installing the Node.js in your system. Just go on Google and search for Node.js. This is the first link appear. Click on here and it will open in this page. Just click on download Node.js latest version and install it in your Windows or Mac, whatever else. First, we're going to be building here our backend part, and after that, we're going to be designing here our frontend part. So what I can do, first I'm going to be opening my terminal and then creating here a folder inside our main directory. Let's create a folder called mkdir, nothing but for make directory. Let's make it as a backend. And then you can see here it will creating here a folder called backend. Now we can simply going to go inside this backend folder. Let's cd backend. And inside that, you're going to creating here one package.json file. So you can making it, let's say npm it. And if I give it here -y, it will make it everything package in installation is yes. So let's make enter. So it will creating here one package.json file. And after that, you're going to installing here the required packages, which is required in order to building here our backend server. So while it is creating here the package.json file, if I go on here and check, you can see here package.json file. So it having the name, version, main file, I mean our main executable file, and after that keyword, author, license, and the description. If you're just typing here npm init, it will asking for everything. So if I give it here this _y or -y, it will simply going to make it everything as yes. Now we're going to installing here some important packages. So let's say npm I first install here the Express. Using Express, we can creating here our server. Then the .env so that we can load in the data from the environmental variables. Then you're going to installing here the body parser. Let's say body parser so that you can getting the request from the body and you can simply parse into our applications. And after that, you can installing the color so that you can give it here some kind of color to the terminals, and the joy library so that you can do the authentication while we take an input from the users using our login form and the registration form. Then you have the JSON web token. Let's JSON web token. It will help us to authenticate the users. I mean, getting the requested from the users, which one is authenticated. And installing the Mongoose. So Mongoose is nothing but the MongoDB database. It's a NoSQL database. Using this one, you can creating the applications. Then you're going to installing here the course. So course is nothing but for cross-platform things. I mean, cross-origin things, because you're going to write in the code in the Express. So the port number is different. And while you're creating here a frontend part, and the port number is also different. Let's say in the backend part, our port number is 8080. But in the case of React, port number is 5174. That means two ports are different. So if I don't connecting one port to another, I mean, try to pass in the data from one port to another port, so you need to installing here this course. Okay. Then after that, we simply going to installing here the node.js. Let's say node.js. So Node.js is one kind of library. Is by default installed while you're installing the Node.js in your system. So it will install that. Node.js is one kind of package, or you can say module, while you are writing any code in your index.js file, or your middlewares, or any kind of files in any kind of JS file. It will try to checking this one, and it will automatically install the servers. I mean, we don't need to change anything else. I mean, we don't need to save, we don't need to actually run in the server multiple times. So Node.js will actually help us to restore our server automatically. So that's it. Now we can simply go to enter. So in installing this, the packages express.env, body browser, color, joy library, JSON web backends, Mongo's, cores, and the Node ones. So if it is needed, the next of the library, we can simply go and install that. Okay. So it will taking few time. I hope so. You also miss one library that's called the Bcrypt. So while you're going to actually passing, sorry, we are going to taking the data from the users, let's say password, and also make it hash. So Bcrypt is also needed. So you can install it later, no problem, while you do the coding. But it's better you can install it at first. Okay. Okay, so install this library. So we can simply go, let's say npm I Bcrypt. Which one is actually missed. So Bcrypt. So using this one, you can hashing our password so that hacker are unable to access it correctly. Okay, I mean directly. So just wait for a few seconds. Well, so it install it. I hope so. So just to wait, and after that, you're going to creating here our server file. So what I can do, you can simply go into creating here a file called index.js. You can make it as a server.js, whatever else. So go on here, and then let's say index.js. So why are you going to writing here our code for the server side? So first, you're going to importing here the express. So import is nothing but one kind of module. So before the ES6 or ES7, it will writing like that. Let's say require like that. Let's say require. We can make it as the express, and after that, you know, to make it as a const express like that. Okay, but after the ES7, we can make it as an import. So if I go on here, and if I typing here type is module, so let's say type is module, and then you can simply go in, instead of using this required, we can using here the input. Okay, so also you need to make some changes inside the script so that our node domain is executed. So we can making, let's say start, and then you can give it, let's say nodemon index.js. So you can see here, it will actually give me some auto suggestions. You can using the GitHub Copilot. Otherwise, you can using the Codium. That's actually using, because GitHub Copilot is the paid versions. So let's go on the index.js file. Now just make it is const is the input, and then removing this one, let's make it as the from and the express like this one. Okay, so then after that, what I can do, we simply go into creating here our servers. Now creating here our application, let's say app is equal to express, and then we're going to actually initialize here on port. So let's say const port. So we can save this port inside our .env file, because this is the confidential file, and which one is not going inside our GitHub directory. So we can simply ignore that. So what I can do is simply going to creating here a file called .env. So let's say .env, and inside that you're going to initialize here a port. Let's say port equal to 8080, and inside this index.js file, so we can simply go into import here the .env. So let's say import the .env from .env, and then it's simply going to config it. Let's say .env.config. Now we can accessing here the file from our .env variables. Now let's say process. So let's say process.env.port. So if the port is open, we can simply going to take it. Otherwise, we make it the port as a 3000. Now we simply going to listen it. Let's say app.listen. And inside that, you're going to give it here the port number, and then you're going to give it here on callback functions, and then you can say that server is running on this port. So what you can do is simply going to save it, and then we also importing here the colors. So let's say import here the colors, import colors from colors, and then you're going to give it here some colors. Let's say let's say bg, let's say green dot bold. Okay, not here, I hope so. So we need to give it here in here. So let's make it as a BZ, let's say cyan, and making as a white, let's say white. So the text is white as well. Now if I save it, and if I go on here, or you can open the terminal on here, or you can also clicking on here. So now let's say npm start. So it will starting our server, and you can see, just to wait, it will give it here on cyan color. So you can see here starting the node index.js file, and it will watching the path, it will correct or not. And after that, you can see server is running on port 8080, and you can see cyan color that you can see on here, that he pass on here. Now what I can do is simply going to give it here one a route, so that you can also see it inside our applications. Otherwise you can also using the postman. So let's take it as the postman, or you can also using testing it is your server. So let's say the first one is API is running, you can see on here, or you can give it here, let's say hello world, like that. Okay, so in here you can see here it will actually passing here one route, and after that it having the one callback function, and inside this callback function it having one request and a response. Now if I save it, and if I go inside my postman, and if I type in here, let's say localhost, so let's say localhost, so it should be the http localhost. Okay, http, and let's say quite not coming. So let's go on here, it will give me the authorization, right? So let's say localhost, yep, right, this one. Let's say localhost 8080, and then we're simply going to click on send. So our server is running, I hope so. So let's go on here, let's see. Okay, any problem? So request.next. Okay, so it had one problem actually. So I hope so. I need to give it here. Anything wrong? Anything wrong? Just to wait. Okay, two things actually happening. It's my bad actually. So you need to removing this one, because it auto actually auto responding. I just okay. Now service is running. We can go on here and now click on send, and then I hope so you get response. Yes, you can see here hello world. So you can also test it in your local browsers. So let's open the browser first. So now let's say localhost 8080, and you can see hello world. That's mean it also working in the case of browsers. That's mean in the case of browser, you're taking the GET request. Now what I can do is simply going to creating here some of the folder structure. So first we're going to creating here a folder called configs. So here we have our database connections. Then we have another folder called controllers. So here we have all of the controllers. Let's say controllers. Then we have the middlewares. Let's say middlewares. Okay, middlewares, it should be wares. And then we have the routes. So sorry, let's create a model first. And then we have the folder called the routes. So it should be the routes. Here you have the other routes of the applications. So now what I can do, first we're going to connecting here our MongoDB server. So you can go on here, just open your MongoDB Compass. It will already connected. So if I click on connect, now let's say new window. So, or you can also opening it first. Otherwise, you can also use it the MongoDB Atlas, which is live. So now it look like the MongoDB Compass. If you have the MongoDB Compass, just install it from the website. And if I click on connect, it will connect into the MongoDB server. So you can see it look like that. It having some default databases, just like that. You can see default databases. Now we're simply going to copy this out. I'm going to copy the connection string, and I'm going to go inside this .env file. And after that, I'm going to saving here the MongoDB URL. Let's say MongoDB, let's say URI. And then I'm going to paste in here the URI. And after that, I have to give it here one database name. Let's say this is the auth projects. Let's say auth projects. Let's say project. Now you're going to creating here a file inside our config file. Let's say db.js. Now inside that, first what I can do is simply importing here the Mongos that we actually install. So let's import here. Let's import here the Mongos from Mongos. And after that, we're simply going to creating here functions called connectdb. Let's say const, let's say connectdb, and then the connectdb is nothing but one asynchronous functions, because it is waiting for a few seconds. It will get in the data from the databases, and you have one callback functions, and then we're simply going to writing this out. Let's say it should be callback functions, and after that you're going to creating here one try and catch block. So try and catch block, and inside this catch block is simply going to see the error. Let's say console.error, so the console.log, and you're going to pass in here our error. That's error. Now inside this try block, we're simply going to connect it to the MongoDB server. Let's say mongos.connect, and inside that you're going to give it here our URL that is inside our process.env file. .env file. So let's say process.env, and our file name is nothing but our MongoDB underscore URI. So you go on here and you're going to pass it to here, this MongoDB URI. Now we're going to creating here a variable. Let's say const is nothing but the connections, and then we need to give it the await because you're going to make it as a async function so that it will waiting for a few seconds. And after that, you're going to using here the console.log so that you can also see it inside our terminal. That's a console.log, and inside this log, we're simply going to printing here. Let's say MongoDB is connected like that. So let's say MongoDB is connected, which is the host name, and you also give it here one cyan color, as well as we give it here some kind of underline. Otherwise, you can also, let's try to format the document first, and then you can give it here, let's say bg, let's say pink color. It is created or not, it's not here. Bg, let's say magenta, and make it as a white like that. Let's say white. Now let's save it, and we're going to go inside our index.js file, and you're going to import it here. Let's say connect db. So after this .env file, we're simply going to calling here the functions called connect db. Let's say connect db, this one. It also import it, but why not actually auto suggesting? So here, okay, you need to also export it. That's why it's not auto suggestions. So while actually creating here any functions or any method, we need to also export it inside our backend server so that you can also import it from another files. So you can export default connect db. Otherwise, you can also make it as in here export. So now let's go on here. Now if I am going to type in here, let's say connect db. So let's say connect, okay, not here. Let's say connect db. You can see it will auto suggestions connect db. So while you're actually using this module type, you need to using here the file extension. Let's say db.js. Let's save it. Now I'm going to running the applications. Let's go on here. You can see server is starting. Okay, starting. If I saving this one, you can see it's starting, and it will try to connecting with our databases. And if I see on here, that's our MongoDB. And now let's see it starting the node index.js file. Just to white because it will connect to the db. So white, okay, not defined. So I hope so it makes some mistake. Yep, it should be a wait. Let's save it now. You can see server is running on port 8080. Also you can see MongoDB is connected. MongoDB is connected. It having some space, has spaces between, just because of you also give it here some kind of space. That's why. So if I actually changing here in the file, it will see it will real timing actually changing everything. It will real timing restart the server. You can see MongoDB connected with the local host. If you are using here the real-time database, if you're using MongoDB at last, it will have the cluster name. Now our database is connected. Now what I can do is simply going to creating here our models. Our user model. So what I can do is simply going to go inside our model file. So let's go inside this model file, and then you're going to creating here user model. Let's say user model.js. Now let's creating here our model file. So first you're going to importing here the Mongos. So let's say Mongos. So Mongos from Mongos. And after that, you're going to creating here one schema. Let's say const, let's say user schema. Let's say user schema. And then you're going to using here new Mongos dot schema. And then schema. And then you're going to creating here our schema. So we have the three things in our register form. We have the name, email, or password. So you can also give it here a more input field if it is needed. So now first we have the name. So name, the type of the name is nothing but string. So let's say type is string, and it also required. So it also required. Let's make it required as a true. And then after that, you're going to creating here our email, and our email is type is string, required is true, and email should be the unique. Okay. Okay, I think I need to removing the one from here. Okay, removing one from here. And after that, you have the password. Let's say password, password. Then you can make it the type as a string. So control Z, password, and then our type is nothing but the string, and the record is nothing but the true. So you can also edit your address, the phone number, everything you actually get it here. Yeah, our aim is to creating here our the projects. I mean, so that you can getting some clarification that how can you creating the backend projects. And after that, you're going to give it here on time step so that you can also give it here the created and updated. I mean, we taking some time from here. So when the database is created, when it's updated. Let's make it time step as a true. And after that, you're simply going to creating here our models. So let's say mongos dot model, and then I'm going to give it here on model name. This is the user model, and then you can passing here our user schema. Let's say user schema, and then you're going to export it here. Let's export default. Let's say default, and you're using here the mongos dot model. So export default, the mongos dot model, and in the user schema. Anything wrong? Declaration accept. What is this? So, okay, default mongos like that. Okay, now it's correct. So our user model is created. Now what I can do is simply creating here our routes. So before that, we need to also initialize here some of the middleware inside our index.js. So let's import it. Let's importing here the body person. Let's say body person. So let's say body person. So body person from the body person, as well as we're going to importing here the course. So let's import it. So let's import here the course from course, and then you can use it to here. So how can you use the middlewares? So before this listen, we can simply go to use it. Let's app.use. We can using here the body parser. Body, it should be body parser. Oh, parser.json. And then we're simply going to also using here the course. Let's say course. So you can also initialize here which port you are going to record or which port you're going to give it access. You can give it to here inside your course. So for the simplicity, you just make it as a the open for the all of the port. I mean default port. Now we're going to creating here our routes. So we're going to go inside our route folder and you're going to creating here our routes. So let's go inside this route folder and creating here a file. Let's say call auth routes. So routes.js, and inside that we are going to creating here our routes. Let's first importing here the express. Now let's from express, we're going to importing here from express. Let's say express, and then you're going to creating here our router. Let's say const router is equal to express dot router. It should be express dot router. Okay, not like that, express dot router. And then we're going to creating here our route. So our first route is nothing but for the register. So let's give it here as a post method because we're going to be posting something to our databases. So our first route is nothing but for the register. Let's say register. And then our second route is nothing but for our the login. So let's say router dot post, and then you can make it as a login. So let's say make it as a login, and then to give it here one callback functions. So let's give it to here. So this is nothing but a callback function. Let's say the register is called, and then you also have the for the login. So this is for the logins. So you need to having one here. So and after that you're going to export it. Let's export default routers. Now you can use this router inside our index.js file. So what I can do, we simply going to using here app.use, then to give it here one initial route. Let's say give it here auth, because this is this thing is nothing but based on the auth, and then you're going to give it here the routes, I mean the router. So it also import it because you also inside the auth router you actually export the router from here. So it also take it from our routers. I mean to also import it. So let's go on here. So if I'm going to now, let's say a router, so it will automatically actually import it. Now if I save it and if I go into this router and if I go inside this postman, Now let's say we have the auth, then we have the register. Let's say register. Now if I click on here and click on request, you can see here cannot got because the method is a post method, and click on send. Now you can see register. If I going to click it here and the login, and then it will actually access the logins. That's been our route. It is also working very fine. So in here we are not actually writing the code. It's called the controller part. So we writing the code inside our controller part, this controller part, and we can access it from here. So now let's get in here controllers, and you're going to import it inside our routers. So let's create a folder called auth router. So let's say auth router.js. Okay, not auth router, it's auth controller, sorry. So let's say controller.js. So now what I can do, first you're going to importing here, import. Okay, I don't think that we need to import it first. So let's get in here functions called sign up, which one is nothing but for the sign up. So let's say sign up, which one is nothing but one async function. Let's say async. And then we need to create in here one callback functions, request response. And inside this code, inside this one, we're simply going to write in the code for our sign up controller. And then we're going to create in here the another controller. Let's say const the login. So let's say login. And now let's say async request or response. So if we are going to type it here, let's say console dot console, okay, console dot log. Now let's say it says sign up. Okay, or you can make it as a register. Let's say register. Let's make it a sign up. So let's say sign up, SIGN, sign up is called like that. And inside that, what I can do is simply going to give it to here. Let's say console.log, login is called. So we can go inside this auth route, and then you're going to using this one. So what I can do is simply going to removing this one, and inside that we're simply going to give it here our controllers. So to removing this one, and we have the sign up. So sign up. Okay, not also export it. So let's go on here. Now let's using export on here. Let's export, and let's use export on here, and let's save it. And now you can access it from the routers. So let's say sign up. So let's say sign up, and it will automatically import it .js, and then we have our login. So we can simply going to removing this one, and then we can simply going to using the login. Let's say login. Let's see, it should be Alice capital. Let's go on here. Let's say login. So on here, okay. So now we can simply going to save it. You have this login and this sign up. Let's go on here. You have this login and this login. Okay, fine. Now let's save it. And now let's go on here. And now if I send on here, you can see, just to avoid anything wrong. So let's go on here and see, is login is called. You can see login is called. If you can see it will actually keep calling. It not actually canceling, because we are going to not stopping here. That's why it will keep logging. So let's try to cancel. And then if I give it here the register, because you're not sending response. So if I using here this res.send, because this is an async function, let's say res.send, and also res.send just in here, so that you can also get a response in our postman. So let's save it. And if I click on here now, you can say login is called. And if I using here the register, then you can see register is called. Okay, sign up is called. Okay, that you can see. That means our controller is working very fine. Now you can writing the actually logics for the sign up and the login period. So now what I can do, first we're going to creating here our sign up. So let's say try and catch block. So let's say try and catch, and inside this catch block, what I can do, we're simply going to give it here some of the status error. So now let's say console.log, let's say console.log, and then you can see our error, and then you're going to send in the response. Let's say res.status. We're going to give it here some status code. So let's say res.send. Okay, let's say rest.send, and then inside that you're going to give it here, let's say 401, and then you're going to give it here the JSON format and message something went wrong, or you can say error in registrations. Okay, you can make it, let's say error in registering the users. Okay, registering users, and then you're simply going to give it the success as a false. So you can give it to here, let's say success as a false, and you can also give it the error as a true. So let's say error is nothing but the true. So you can format this out. So let's format this out first, format the documents. Now cool. Now inside this try block, what I can do, first we're going to checking here. First you're going to getting the data from our request.body, and after that you're going to check if the data is valid or not. So what I can do, we can using a const, and you're taking the name, the email, and the password. Because if I go inside this our model file, even the model, we have the three things: name, email, and the password. So let's go on here, auth controller. It will coming from the request.body. So it will come in the request body. So first you need to checking that if the email and the password is invalid or not. So if the name, email, and the password is invalid, or it is not given by the users for the authenticated, we're simply going to give it here on a status code of the 400. Please fill all the field, and success as a false, and also error is a true. We just make it at here. Now after that, what I can do is simply going to checking here that if the user is available or not. If the user email is already available, that means this email is already registered. We are not registering this email. That means we're also finding here on existing users. If the existing user is existed, then we are not going to make it the user as a registered. I mean user already registered. So what I can do is simply going to creating here const, let's say existing users, and then you can using here our user models that we created. You can see user models. Now what I can do, you're going to using here the user model. Let's say user model, and then you're going to using the find one. So let's say find one. So you're going to find it based on the email, because based on the email you can say that if the user is created or not. Now let's say we're going to passing here our email. So if the existing user is available, that means you're not going to creating here any users. We're going to making here one error message, user is already exist. Now let's say if the existing users, we can give it here on a status code of the 400 is called user is already exist. Now if it is not having, we're simply going to creating here one users. Now let's say users is equal to await user model dot create with the name, email, and the password. Now after that you can simply going to save it. You can save it on here. Otherwise you can also using here user dot save like that. You can also using like that. Let's say I'm going to give it here one semicolon, and then you can using, let's say await. So it's the await. If I give it to the await in here, so we can using here the user dot save on here. So you need to creating here the new, because you're going to creating here the new users. So that's why you can see it will saving the users. And after that you can say that let's say rest, then status of the 201 user is registered successfully. Okay, now what I can do is simply going to save it, and then we're simply going to test it to the postman. So our auth is nothing but our sign up. So let's go on here, and now let's say sign up. Okay, the register, and then go on the body, then raw text should be the JSON, and then to give it here name. Let's give it here the name. Now let's give it here the name called, let's say Chandodhar, and then I'm going to give it here one email. Let's say email. I just give it here on wrong email syntax. So let's say chandodhar.gmail.com. Okay, because you are not giving here, you are not adding here any authentications. So just give it here some wrong information on here. Now let's say password, and now let's give it here 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Now if I click in on here, so it will requesting, okay, any errors. Let's go on here and see that. So let's see new error, auth controller.js. So let's go on here. Yep, you need to also give it here .js. That's why it's not running. So yep, it is to the server. So let's save it, and now you connect it. Now let's click on save, and then you can see unauthorized. Okay, any problems? So unauthorized auth the register. So let's see. Status send. Okay, auth controller.js user model create is not a constructor. Okay, let's see. User model, user schema, export default models is okay. User model. So let's go on auth controller. So from the user model dot models, you're going to importing here the user model. Sorry, actually the problem actually happening just because of you actually give it here the sign without the status, as well as we are not going to using the create because it's not a constructor, because we're going to using here the new keyword. So if we are just using here the await, you can using here the create methods. So that's the problem actually. So we have the user model, you just simply going to pass into here, and then you're going to save it now, and let's go on here, and now let's click on send, and you can see user is registered successfully. Okay, now let's go on here in the MongoDB, and if you refresh it, then you can see auth projects. They're creating here a users. You can see as, and you can see here the users is right down here. You can see name, email, and the password. But the problem is password is nothing but in a plain text format. So you need to also hash it things out. So what I can do is simply going to importing here the Bcrypt. So let's say import here the Bcrypt. So let's say Bcrypt from the Bcrypt, and then you can using the Bcrypt on here. So what I can do is simply going to use it here. So let's say user.password, we make it as a hash, await of Bcrypt hash, and you also give it here one salt. Let's make it as a salt as a 10. And now let's go on here, and let's go to Postman. Now let's click on send. You can see user is already exists. That's when this validation is working very fine. So let's give it here another one. Let's give it here the @rate, and let's give it here 1 and if I click on send, and you can see user registered successfully. If I go on here and if I refresh it, now you can see our second one, it's hash. You can see in the hash format, and also you can see created at and the updated at. But it also having one problem that the email and the name and the password is not validated. So what I can do, we can simply go to creating here on middleware, and you can pass it inside our auth routes. So what I can do, we can creating here and middleware for the authentications, so that we can also build it in our server side. So what I can do, we can creating here a file called auth validations.js. Now let's say we are going to importing here the joy library. So let's import the joy. So let's import the joy from joy, and then you're going to creating here and creating here the auth validations. So which one for the sign up? It's a sign up validations. Let's say sign up validations, and then you're going to have the request, response, and the next keyword, because we're creating here on middlewares. And then you have the arrow functions, and after that you can write in the schema for actually the validations. So you're creating here a schema which will have the name, email, and the password, and name is required is a string, and then it is required, and you can give it the maximum. So let's give it the maximum of the 30 maximum name, and then in the case of email, it should be the email, so you can make it as email. And then in the case of password, the minimum is 4. That's the minimum length is 4, and we can give it here on maximum as well. Let's give it the maximum. Let's using here, let's say 30 as a maximum. So this is nothing but for the const schema for actually the sign up validations. So now let's validate the schema. So what I can do, we can using the schema dot validate, and inside that you simply going to passing here our request dot body. I mean, data is coming from the requested body, right? And this is my validator, and it will actually give me some kind of error. If the validation is error, it will returning here on error message. So you can store it inside the error variable. Let's say error, and this is nothing but our schema errors. So if it is error, simply going to giving here some kind of response. Yes, error is coming from here. So if the error is coming, then you can simply going to say that we're going to be returning here res.status, let's say status of 400.json, and you can sending here one message. So let's say message is error.details of 0.message. I mean, just it will returning here the error message. And after that, we're simply going to calling here our next one, so that it will execute it in the next statement. Now we can simply going to save it, and you're going to go inside our auth route, and in our auth route we have the register, and you're going to creating it for the sign up validations, I mean for the register. And inside these sections we're simply going to write down our middlewares, I mean our auth validator middlewares. So we're going to using here auth validator. It's not coming just because of we are not actually exporting it here. So you can simply export it from here. Let's export in here, and after that you're going to save it, and you're going to go on our auth route. And if I say that, let's say auth, okay, auth validations or not, it's the sign of validations. So we're going to using here sign of validations, this one sign up validations, and then we're simply going to give it here on comma, and it will also execute it. And if I save it and go on the postman, so this is the register. And now let's say I'm going to give it here, let's say 123, and I'm going to give it here one wrong email. And if I click on send, then you can see, just wait, I hope so, and it will run the server again, just because of actually stop the recording, that's why. So let's backend, and now let's say npm start, and then it will start in the server. And after that you can testing it out inside the postman. So starting the node index.js, yes, connected. Now you can simply going to send the request. So it will validate. You can see email must be an valid email. So let's say give it here one valid email, and now let's click on send. And then you can see here password length must be at least 4 character long. You can see on here. Okay, so let's say 45, and if I click on send, and you can see user is already exists. That's mean our authentication is working very fine. If I give it here another name, let's say 123, and if I click on send, and you can see user registered successfully. You can see it inside our MongoDB. So you can see 123@gmail.com, as well as the password is in a hash format. Cool. Now we can do it for the login as well. So what I can do is simply going to validate it for the logins. So let's say I'm going to simply using the export. So const, it's called a login validations. Let's say login validations. So we can also copy the same thing. In the case of login, it's just having the email and the password. You can copy this out. You can pass it to here, and instead of using the sign up validations, we can using here the login validations. And inside that you can removing here this name. Okay, same thing, all of the things are same. We can using here this login validations. Let's save it and go on the auth route, and inside that you simply going to copy and paste, and you're going to give it here for the case of login. Okay, but if I go inside our auth controller, we're simply going to write in the code for the sign up, but you're not writing the code for the login. Okay, so if I just save it, and if I go on here, and in the case of login, so let's say login, and if I removing this name, and if I give it here one wrong Gmail, and if I see click on send, you can see email must be an valid email. That's when our authentication is working very fine, but we are not writing here the login logic in our auth controller. So you're not also writing the logic for the auth controller, in the auth controller. So what I can do is simply going to creating here one try and catch block. So let's say try and catch, and inside this catch block, what I can do is simply going to take in the response that internal server error, or you can also give it here the same thing. Okay, so you can using here console.log, and you can simply going to printing the errors, and then you can using here res.status, status of 401 error in login, like that. Okay. Now in the case of try block, what I can do in the case of login, you are just taking here the email and the password. So we can using here const email and the password. Let's say password, and you are taking it from request.body. So in the case of login, okay. So in the case of login, what I can do, email and password. Yep. In the case of login, you're also checking here that if the email and the password is filled or not. And after that, what I can do is simply going to searching for the users if the user is available or not. So what I can do, you can using here const user equal to, and you can using here the await, and you can using here the user model. That's user model, and you can find it based on the email. So let's say find one, and it's simply going to give it here email. So if the email is find, that's mean user is already available. That means we can log in. Okay. So what I can do, if the user is not available, we can simply going to send here one message that user does not exist. So if the user, so let's say if the user is not available, we can returning one status code of 400 that user does not exist and the success rate is false and error is true. Now we are also getting here our users. Now we need to also matching the password. So the password is in the form of hash. So what I can do, we need to also compare the password from here. So what I can do, we can simply go into using here, let's say await, and you're going to using the Bcrypt that you already use that bcrypt.compare, and you can pass in here the password which is coming from here, requested body from here, and then you're going to compare the password to our user. I mean this user dot password. Okay, password, that's it. We can compare it, and after that we're simply going to store it inside variables. So it's nothing but a match. Okay, so let's say const is match. Okay, is match, and then if it is match, if it is doesn't match, so bcrypt.compare. Yep. So if doesn't match, so if it is not match, is match, that's mean to give it here one message that invalid credentials, or you can say invalid email or password. Okay, you can say that invalid email or password. Don't sound like that. Don't sound like that your email is wrong or your password is wrong, so that the hacker can also using here the brute force method, to accessing the passwords or emails. So it's better you can just save it, actually send it as invalid email passwords, so that the hacker are unable to say actually guess that if the error is coming from the emails or if the error is coming from the passwords. So that's the best practice to using here these kind of things. Okay. Now what I can do, so if it is match, we're simply going to give it here a response. So let's say res.send, I mean status. We're going to give it here a status of 200, user logged in successfully. So you can simply save it. And if I go on here, so first what I can do is simply going to register the users. So I think, okay, register the users. So the case of register, what I can do, I need to give it here also one name. So let's say name, and then I'm going to give it here a name. Let's say Mishodhar. Okay. And then I'm going to give it here a password. Let's say 123 at the 4, and password I'm going to give it here. Let's say 123456789, and then I'm simply going to send the request to here, and you can see user register successfully. So in the case of login, I'm going to taking it here another one, and then I'm going to using here localhost. Okay, let's say 8080. I just changing this one, so this should be the auth, and then you have the login. So in the case of login, the method is nothing but the post method, and you can copy here the email and password from here. Okay, so you can go on here, body sections, raw text should be the JSONs, and then you simply going to give it to the JSON format, and you paste here the email and the passwords. Now let's click on here in the case of login, and you can see user logged in successfully. If I give it here one wrong email, and if I click on send, you can see user doesn't exist. Cool. If I give it here on wrong password, and as well as I simply going to removing the file from here, and if I click on send, you can see invalid email or passwords. Cool. That's mean it's really working very fine. But the here's the problem that See, every time when the users log in to the applications, he need to sign up with the email and the passwords. So what if we just sign up the user for the once at a time, and we can store it inside our cookies or inside our local storage? It's the best choice, right? Yes, it's the best choice. So that's why we are going to using the JSON web tokens. So now what I can do is simply going to using this one. So what I can do is simply going to import it. So let's importing here the JWT. So just a JWT from JSON web token. Using this one, we can also protecting our route. So if the user is login, he can show here the home page like that. So now what I can do is simply going to use it in the case of login. I mean, how the user is login once a time, it will save it inside our browsers in our local storage of the cookies. So what I can do is simply going to use it. So we can use it here. We can use it. Let's say const, let's say JWT token, okay, token, and you can simply go to using here JWT.sign. And inside this sign in, we're going to sign in based on the email and the user ID. So let's say email, and in the case of email, it's store it inside the users, so we can actually access it from the users, because user is nothing but an instance for that. We can simply going to access it from here, and the ID is nothing but the underscore ID. So ID is nothing but the object ID. If I see on here, you can see it automatically created underscore ID. So ID is nothing but the user dot underscore ID. Okay, and then it will also give it here one JWT secret key. So we can store it inside this env file. So let's say JWT secret, and to give it here one secret key. So let's give it here one secret key. Let's give it here one name. Let's say Ganesha. Okay, just secret key. Okay, Ganesha, let's say, okay, just Ganesha. Okay, that's a secret key. So I'm going to go inside this auth controller, and inside that I need to give it here the secret key. Let's say process.env jwt secret. This is the variable name should be correct, JWT secret, as well as you need to give it here one experience. So just experience 1 hour. After 1 hour, it will automatically expire. So you can give it here 1 day as well. Let's make it 1 day or 24 hours. You can give it here. Now when you sign it here, it will give it here on JWT token. So you can also send it in your response if you want to see it. So what I can do is simply going to first sending here the JWT token, and as well as we're going to sending here our email. I mean the user email which one is signing, I mean which one is login, and as well as in the case of name, we're simply going to give it here user.name. I mean which user is actually login and which is his name. Okay, so what I can do is simply going to save it, and you can go on here, and if I see in the case of login, and if I see in this here, you can see here it's nothing but the Mishu Dor is the name of the persons. Now what I can do, if I send on here, then you can see embedded email and passwords. So what I can do, we can simply going to give it the actual passwords, and if I give it here, and you can see user logged in successfully, as well as success is true, false is a false, and JWT token is nothing but my token. Okay, it's coming inside the header sections, and also you can see email is nothing but this email, and this is a username of this person. Okay, that you can see while we do the registrations, right? Now what I can do is simply going to using this JWT token into protecting our routes. So let's say I having a route, I have one page, let's say home page, or let's say I just make it as a e-commerce applications. I have the product pages, so I can also protect them. If the user is not signing, he is unable to access the product page, right? So let's try to checking this out. So for this case, what I can do is simply going to creating here another things for actually decoding. Okay, for the decoding, so that we can authorize these ones. So what I can do is simply going to creating here one middleware, so that you can use it inside our product pages. Let's say I'm going to creating here product pages, so that it will ensure that authentication is built. So what I can do first, I'm simply going to creating here one route for that. Let's go on here. Let's say I'm going to creating here one product route. Okay, just for simplicity, I'll later on I actually changing this on, I mean for just for the understanding. Okay, product routes. So now what I can do in the case of product route, we're simply going to creating here the route. So let's import here the express from express, and then I'm simply going to creating here one product route. Let's say const product route. Let's say product router is equal to express.router, and then I'm going to creating here one get methods. So let's say product router that get method, and it will say that hello from product router. Okay, so you can also sending here some kind of product as well. So let's say I'm going to sending here some product with the status code of 200. Let's say status let's say 200 product fetch successfully, or you can also give it here some kind of product. So let's add it inside a list. So now let's say we having a product which one having on name. Let's say name is laptop, or let's say product is one, description is product on description, and price is let's say 100. Okay, and then you're going adding here another product. Let's say name is product number 2, and description product number 2, and price is let's say 200, like that. Okay, so this is nothing but my product route. So now I'm going to export default it. Let's say export default the product routers. So if I save it and if I use it inside this index.js, so let's use it here. Let's say app.use, and then I'm simply going to using here, let's say product. So product, and then you have the product routers. So it also access this one. Let's say product router. So it will automatically import it. Yeah, fine. Now if I save it and if I go on here, now if I go inside that and if I changing this one as a product, let's say product, and then we have the initial route, and if I click on here and you can see cannot post, okay, it should be the get methods, and if I click on send, you can see here we getting here our product correctly. Now the question is, if the user is successfully logged in, then you can showing here the product, otherwise not. Okay, so for this case we need to also ensure that if the user is logged in correctly or not. So that's why when you're creating here a middlewares, so this is nothing but called, let's say product auth, or you can say product middleware, like that. So let's say product auth middle, like that. You can give it here any kind of name. Let's say product auth middle.js. We're going to ensure that it's visible to the users. Okay, so now let's create it. So we can simply going to import it first. Let's import here the to import here the JWT token. So let's say JWT from JSON web tokens, and then I'm going to creating here an actually functions called the ensure authenticated. Let's say const ensure authenticate. Let's authenticate it, and then it's simply going to creating here the middleware. Let's say request response on the next, and after that it's simply going to taking it from the header, because our JWT token is stored it inside the header sections. So we can simply going to take it. Let's say const auth is equal to, let's say request dot header dot authorizations. You can also add it inside this header part. So let's authorizations part. So if the auth is correct, if it is auth is not available, I mean if you are not giving here the JWT token correctly, it will give me some kind of error called unauthorized options. And after that you're going to creating here one try and catch block. So try and catch block, and in the case of catch block is simply going to returning here one response. Now let's say console dot log, and you can simply going to showing here the errors, and after that you can send the response. Let's say as dot status of, let's say 401, and you can say the unauthorized JWT token is required. Let's say JWT token is required. Okay, and then inside the cage of try, so we're simply decoding here our JWT token. So let's say JWT dot verify, and we can simply passing here the auth, and then the process dot auth, and you can passing here our JWT secret. It's a process dot env dot JWT secret. Okay, secret, 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 and then you can simply going to store it inside variables. So let's say we have the const decoded, and after that you're simply going to store it inside the users. Okay, let's say request dot user, and you can simply going to decode it. You can pass in the decoded, and then you can calling here the next, because this is a middleware. Now we can simply going to using this and share authenticated. So we can copy, or you can simply going to go inside this router, I mean product router. So we can simply going to add it to here. Let's say ensure. Okay, it's not exported yet. That's when it also export it. So let's make it export, and then you can simply going to export it here. Let's say ensure authenticated. Okay, ensure authenticated, this one middlewares. Okay, now let's make it as a .js, and then I have to give it here one comma. Now let's save it, and if I go on here and if I click on now, in the case of product page, you can see unauthorized, I mean it's not authorized yet. Now if I register it or login, I need to log in it here. So let's make it as a login, and then if I removing this name, and then if I click on send, so you have my JWT token. I can simply gonna copy this out, and I can using this one. And in the case of headers, and in the case of header, I need to give it here one authorizations, and then I have to give it here the authorization key on here. And if I click on send, you can see product, you have the product. If I just removing some character from here and click on send, you can see unauthorized JWT token is required. That's mean if the JWT is required, that means you can simply go into log into the users and you can see the product page, or you can see the home pages. So this is our backend part. Now what I can do is simply going to designing our frontend part, and some of the things are case is missing in the case of backend. Later on, you are going to fixing this out, but this is not with backend in the case of login and the registrations, as well as you protecting our route. Let's call it route protecting, because if the user is not registered, why should you give it access to the home pages? Okay. Now let's go on here in the frontend part and start creating here our React applications. Now it's time to creating here our front end part. So for this case, I'm going to using here the React.js. So let's creating here one React.js projects using bit or byte, whatever you can say. So let's go on here, or you can click on here in order to opening the terminal. So what I can do first, I'm going to creating here projects using the command. Let's say npm create bit @latest. It will creating here one React projects. So let's make it bigger and make sure that your internet connection is on. Now to give it here one project name. So you can see here in the case of backend, I just give the name as a backend. So in the case of frontend, let's give it here as a frontend. Okay. And you need to selecting here the framework. Let's select the framework as React, and language is JavaScript. Simple, right? So now let's go inside the frontend folder, and then installing here the packages. Let's say npm I. So it is installing here some required packages. And after that, you can installing here the React Router DOM, React Hot Toast, as well as the Axios, so that we can call in the API from the backend server. So it will taking few seconds, and I need to waiting for that. So while in install, now we can installing here the Axios, React Router DOM, and the React Hot Toast. So let's say npm I React Router DOM, so that you can also do the routing in the case of React.js, as well as you're going to installing here React Hot Toast, so that you can also show the toast. Let's say user registered successfully or any kind of error message. Then the Axios is nothing but for the API call. So let's enter. It will be installing here in our frontend package.json file. You can see it also have the package.jsons. It will have the name, and as well as it have the dependency. You can see that. So how are you actually installing here this React.DOM, React Hot Toast, and the Axios, it will actually add it to inside this dependencies list. Now I am simply going to installing here the tailwind CSS. I mean configure the tailwind CSS on here. So for that, what I can do is simply going to go on this website link. So we do the first two things. We can copy here these things and pin install d tailwind CSS 3 post CSS and the auto prefixer. So go on here, and I am simply going to pass it here. Let's pass it to here. It is installing and configure the tailwind CSS in your projects. And after that, what I can do is simply going to change something inside the tailwind.config.js. So when actually installing here the tailwind CSS, as well as configure that, it will creating here this config file. And after that, you can use in the tailwind CSS in order to design in the applications. So while it will creating here tailwind.config.js, you can see just you need to write down this type command npx tailwind css init p, And after that, we're simply going to go on here. We're going to copy this full code and go on inside that config.cs, and we're simply going to paste it here. Save it and go again and copy here this one and paste it inside this index.css. So let's go inside that index.css and delete all of them and paste it to here. Let's save it, and as well as now go to the terminal and type here npm run dep. So you can say that npm run dep. After running here our applications, so you can see it will running up and down. You can simply going to go on here and follow the link. So it will actually opening here the applications bit plus react, but it's not the original website because we're changing something inside the tailwind css. So you can see bit plus react, as well as you can see one counter applications. Cool. Now you can simply going to go on here. You can also delete all of the app.css because it's not required at all. We can save it, and you can go on here. It look like that. Now I simply going to go inside this app.jsx. You can see here this is the code. So what I can do, I am simply going to removing all of the code from here because it's not necessary at all. So first what I can do is simply going to using here the routing. So for this case, you need to also creating here some folder like pages where you can storing here all of the pages. So let's first actually changing inside this app.py, and after that we're simply going to do some changes or coding the applications for the login or sign up. So first you need to go inside this main.jsx, and after you can go inside this app.jsx. First you need to import in here the browser router. So let's import here the browser router. So that's a browser router from the React router DOM. So you can also using this kind of thing. Otherwise you can also do it inside the curly brackets. That's a React router, and you can import it from the React router DOM like that. Okay. Now you're going to using here this browser router and wrap it to our applications. So we're simply going to removing this stick mode. It's not needed at all. So you can simply go into using here this browser router, and inside that is simply going to paste here our applications. I mean the app. Now you can simply going to format this out, format the documents. Now our application is ready and wrapped with the browser router. Now you can do the routing of the applications. So you have the three route. One is called login, another one is called sign off, and the page not found. As well as we have the another one. That's the fourth one. It's called the home page. So now let's go inside this app.jsx, and inside this app.jsx, we're simply going to creating here the router. So you need to importing here the router as well as the routes. Okay. So we're simply going to import it. You can deleting this out. So now let's import here the router. So let's say router or routes. It should be the routes. Okay. So we need to import it the routes, as well as we need to import here the route. So route is nothing but for the plural number. I mean multiple number of route you can designing on here, and as well as you import here the route. So you also need one thing that's called a navigate, so that you can also navigate from one page to another page. So let's say navigate. Now you can simply go into creating the route inside our fragment. So let's go on here and creating here the route first. So inside this routes we have the route. Okay. So we can simply go into closing this route. So let's say closing. Okay, not like that. Sorry, actually we can say like that route, and inside this routes, it should be route. Sorry, inside this route we are going to defining here our route. So let's say route, and inside this path we're simply going to give it here our initial path, and which one navigate to home, and then we have the login and the sign up. So you're going to copy this out first, and then you're going to paste it here 2 times. So this is nothing but for the login, and this is nothing but for the sign up. So I just removing here the first one. I'll show you the later on. That we have the page not found one. So what I can do is simply going to paste it here. So page not found, that's mean if the link is embedded, it will give you the page not found. Okay. So you can see navigate to home page like that. So what I can do is simply going to creating here some kind of pages. So let's go inside the sources, and inside there you're going to creating here a folder called pages, and inside these pages you're going to creating here the home page first. Okay, not home page. Let's create the login page first. So let's say login page.jsx, or you can say login.jsx. And then you're going to using here this RFC. it will creating these ones. Then you're going to creating here the sign up page. Let's say signup.jsx, and we are going to using here this RFC. It is creating here these ones, and then we have the not found page. Let's say not found. Let's say JSX. So it will creating here this one. Let's RFC, not like that, RFC. And then after that is simply going to creating here the home page. Let's say home page. So home page like that, home page dot JSX. Okay. Now let's go inside this app.jsx. So let's closing this out. Okay, let's close all of them and go inside this app.jsx. Now in the case of login, we're simply going to pass in the element as the login. So we can simply going to make it and creating here the login. Let's say login. It's not here. You're already creating this, right? Import login. So we save it. I need to saving here. It's all exported. You can import it from here. So let's say I'm going to say the login here, and then this is the login page. It's already imported. You can see from the page.login. Then in here is simply going to give it here the sign up. So let's say sign up, not like that, sign up. Okay, sign up, it's coming. We can also import it from here. So we can import here the sign up. Okay, let's say sign up from the pages.signup, as well as the import here the not found. Okay, the not found. Okay, not found from the pages not found. This one not found. Okay, so you can also import it to here. You can say that, okay, any error. Okay, we can say that it's done not found. Not found. Okay, this one. Now for the initial path, what I can do is simply going to say that in the initial part, we're simply going to navigate to the login pages. Okay, I mean for the initial path. So let's go on here, and now let's open the applications here. You can see here not found. Okay, so you can see home because it's coming as a home. So if I just making as the actual link, it will automatically redirect to the login. It will automatically redirect to the login. If I give it to the sign up page, let's say sign up, you can see sign up page. And if I give it here some digit, you can see not found. That's mean it is working very fine in the case of routing. Now what I can do is simply designing the login page as well as the sign up page and the not found page. So what I can do, I am simply going to actually pasting here the code, or I just type it down. And after that, I am simply to back again, because you know it's nothing but the tailwind CSS. It's easy to do, you know that, and I'm not going to waste in the time. You can access the code in the GitHub. So let's try to run. I mean, creating here the login page, sign up page, and the not found page. So so designing the login page, sign up page, and the not found page. So in the case of login, it's just having the email and the passwords, as well as it having one button where you can click to go inside the sign up pages. And in the case of sign up pages, you just have the name, email, and the passwords. And not found page is just having one writing things like 404 page not found like that. And also one button where you can go to the home. So if I see the applications, this is the UI how it look like. It has the login page. You can type in here your informations. If I click here the register here, it will go to the sign up page. And if I type in here something irrelevant, it's a page not found. If I click on the go home, it will directly go inside this login pages. Now what I can do, if I try to typing something inside there, let's say chando@gmail.com, and if I give it here some password, and if I click on login, and if I inspect, so if I inspect, you cannot see anything else inside the consoles. As well as you can see your email and the password is stored it inside your search bar. So it's not a valid, it's not taking input from the users. So to handling this out. So how can you handle them? Using the state management. So you can go on here and you're going to importing here first use state. So let's say import here the use state. So let's say in the case of login first, okay, let's say to do it for the sign up, because after sign up we can do the login, because in the case of sign up it is creating here some JWT tokens. So let's go to sign up first, and after that you're going to designing here the make it functional for the login pages. So first you're going to creating here a state. So let's import here the use state hook. It's called the hook in React. So use state, and after that we're simply going to creating here the state. So let's say const, so it's a from data, so let's say from data, and then it also set the from data, let's say from data, and after that you're going to creating here one use state. So let's say use state, and in the use state what we having one curly brackets, and inside this curly bracket we have the name, we have the email and the passwords, because we're going to passing on here, right? So this is the state of that. Now what I can do is simply going to pass in this state value inside my name, email and the passwords. So in the case of input tag, it having one things called the value. So what I can do is simply going to save it. Let's say value is equal to from dot name. So and then we have the another things for the email. So let's say value is nothing but call from data dot email. Same thing in the case of passwords, we have the from data. Let's say value is equal to from data dot passwords. So if I give it here one name, let's say I'm going to give it here by default name. Let's say Chandu Chandudhar, let's say. And if I save it, if I go inside the sign up pages, this start here you can see by default is Chandudhar. That's when the state is changes. So that's when by default we simply going to give it here name as the empty, and how the user set any value, or how the user type any the value inside the text info input field, it will try to guide the data and try to store it inside this use state. And then we're simply going to replace it, show it inside the unchanged. If I go inside that, if I try to type something, let's say if I type something, you can see that we cannot type anything else on here. I also typing in the keyboard, but it's not printing. So it's also printing this out, right? So how can you do that? We can simply go into creating here function, so that you can also handle the changes on that. So let's say const the handle change. This is the function I'm going to making this out. Handle change, this is one callback functions. So after that we're simply going to set the from data to the from data, dot dot dot, taking all of the things, and we're simply going to taking all of the value from here, based on the name, and try to pass the value inside the, each of the name. Let's say I have the name of the name, and I have the name is nothing but called the email. You can see it having one things called name tag, and based on this name, so it's not called the tag, actually it's called the attribute. So based on this name attribute, it will take in here all of the data of the value and try to pass it inside the set from data. So when the data is pass it inside the set from data, it will automatically changes inside the variables. So if I go on here, and now if I type something, you can see it also unable to type, because you are not adding it inside our field. So how can we do that? We can simply go on here. It have a property called on change. Now in the case of on change, you're simply going to pass it here our function. Now let's copy this out, and I'm going to paste it to here, and same thing here, paste it to here. Now let's save it and go on here, and then if I type in something, you can see now I can typing also here. Now what I can do is simply going to now typing here, let's say Chandu Dhar, and now let's give it here some email. Let's say chandu@gmail.com, and let's give it the password. Let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6 like that. Now let's click on sign in. You can see it's also signing, and if I go into this inspect, and if I go inside this console, we cannot also see the anything else, because we are not printing anything else on here. So let's go on here, and you can also printing something on here. How you need to do some changes on here. You can also do the console.log. So let's say console.log. Okay, console.log. You can actually printing here the from data. So let's go on here, and now let's say Chandu. You can see Chandu Dhar. You can see here it will also printing this out. Let's say email. Let's say Chandu@gmail.com. You can see it also changes, and then if password, let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6, like that, you can see. Okay, it will actually replicate it on here. Okay, now you have our data, right? We have our data. Now we can simply going to uh, pass it to our databases. So for this case, you need to also opening here the MongoDB, right? So MongoDB or the backend server, it's also running our backend server. So we can simply going to go on here, and we can simply going to go on here, and we can also open the terminal. Otherwise, you can also open it inside the command palette. It will be better. Let's go to the command palette and in the folder structure and try to opening this out. So that's our backend folder. Let's go inside that and open the cmd, and now let's say npm start. It will actually opening our server. Then if I go inside this route or index.js, so index.js, we having our route. It's not bit called the auth, and inside this auth we have our controller. So controller, we have the login and the register. I hope so. It's the sign up, and you have the controller for that. We need to go inside the routes. So it's auth routes. So you have the auth routes. It's nothing but the register and the login. Cool. Now let's go inside that. What I can do, it's our MongoDB. Now let's go on here, and now we're going to importing here the Axios. So let's import here the Axios. So let's import here the Axios from Axios, because you need to also calling here our API calls. Now what I can do, we can using here this handler inside our from. So let's say we have the on submit. Let's on submit, and we can using here the handle submit. So it's also creating here this handle submit, right? So let's creating this out. Let's say const. We can give it here const. Let's say handle submit. Okay, let's say handle submit. Handle submit. Okay, you can say that let's submit. And this is on asynchronous functions, async functions. Now inside that, first we simply going to calling here our API. So we can simply going to say that first you're going to using here e.prevent default, so that our page is not going to loading. And after that, you're going to do structuring the data from the from data. So in the case of from data, what we have the, in the case of from data, we have the name, email, and the passwords. So let's say name, and you have the email, and you have the passwords from the from data. Okay, let's say from data. And after that, what you have, we simply going to checking here if the name is empty or not. So you can simply going to give it here all field are required. We just simply going to give it here one alert message. And after that, we're simply going to using here the try and catch block. So inside this try and catch block, we're simply going to calling here our API. So let's say console.log is simply going to showing here the errors. And then you can also give it here some toast. So for that, I'm going to importing here the toaster. So let's say toast. So we can using here the toaster. So you already imported here. I mean, we already installed here the toast, right? So you can simply going to using here the toaster. Okay, not like that. We can using here the toaster first. Let's say toaster from React Hot Toast. Okay, now you're going to using here this toaster and the last of the applications. So let's say toaster, just creating here the instance of the toaster. After that, you can using here these ones. So this is the error. So we can say that something went wrong like that, or you can also give it here the error response data. So you can say that the toast dot error, we can simply going to showing here the response is coming from here. So we can simply going to say that something went wrong. Now in the case of try block, is simply going to calling here our API. So let's say await, and you're going to using the execute.post method. Then you have the localhost 8080. So let's say 8080, and then you have the auth. Then you have the sign up or register. I think we have the register. is called the register. Okay, so let's say it's called the register, and in here we're simply going to pass in here the structured data. So let's say name, email, and the password. Let's say passwords. So let's go on the MongoDB first. Go inside its auth projects. We have the users. It's have 11 users. Let's try to deleting all of them, because so that you can also checking this out. So we can simply go into drop the collections. Yes, our backend is running, so you can drop the collections. So let's say users. So we can drop the collections because our server is running, right? If I go on here, you can see our server is running. So go on here, auth register 8080 email passwords. So it will giving here the response. Let's say const give the response, and after that you can simply going to see the response console.log. We can see the response.data, and if the response.data is actually success, so let's say if the response.data success, we can simply going to toasting here the success of data.message, and we can simply going to navigate these ones. So navigate the applications to the another pages, but we can simply going to show this just toast. We are not going to navigate this right now. Let's see first it is working or not, and after that you can simply navigate to the login pages. Now let's save it, and let's see our application is running or not. Yep, our application is running. Let's go on here. Okay, no error. Let's go on the applications. So it's not needed at all. We can simply go on here. Now let's reload it. The sign up page. Let's first open the console. So console, any error? No error. Now let's say Chandodhar. Then let's say Chando at the rate of gmail.com. You can say that it's 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Let's click on sign up. So you can see user registered successfully. This is the message. You can see we have the user registered successfully. If I go into this network sections, and you can see our API is called in the register. If I see the payload, you can see there's the email I actually sent using the registrations. You can see the preview user registered successfully. And if I go inside that, and you can see if I reloading this one, you can see auth projects users. It will also creating here a new users. That's when our sign up page is working very fine. Now you can simply go into set one timer, and based on the timer it will navigate to the login pages. So you can simply go using here set time out is a call, it's a functions. So inside this function you simply going to navigate. So it also import here the navigations. Let's say use navigations, the use navigate. It's use navigate. So use navigate from the React router DOM, and you can simply creating this out. Let's say const, and you can say that navigate is equal to use navigate, and you can simply going to pass it to here. So it's the set timer, and then you're simply going to navigate here. Okay, let's say navigate to the login pages. So set timeout is a functions, and then we have this one as a function, and navigate to these ones. So let's save it now. And now if I go inside that console, any error? Okay, no error. Now let's give it here. Let's say Chandu. Let's say Mishudhar Chandu. And if I give it here, let's say wrong Gmail. Let's say chandu.gmail.com. As well as I give it here 1 2 3 password, just like that. You can see it's including here this one. You have to give it here one email, billet email. If I give it here one billet email, and you can see something went wrong. Okay, in the case of registrations. Now if I give it here the wrong same thing, it will give the same thing. So because this is an error, so you can also show here the error in the case of in the case of toast. So we can simply going to give it to here. you can give it here error dot response. It's a response dot data dot message. Now if I save it and if I go inside that and if I reloading the applications, let's give it here name. Let's say Mishudhar. Let's say Chando, and then let's say Chando at the rate of gmail.com, and let's say 123. And if I click on here, you can see password length must be at least 4 character long. That's when you can see that it also handling the error from the server side, because you write in this code in the server side, right, using a joy library. So this authentication is coming from the server side. Let's give it here 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. If I click on sign up, you can see user already exists. That's when our authentication is working very fine. Now let's give it here Chando, let's say 1 2, and password, let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Click on sign up. User registers successfully. It will automatically redirect to the login page. That's when we successfully creating here our sign up page. And if I see here in the MongoDB database, if we're refreshing this one, you can see it have that two it's called two target or two features like that. Okay, I mean two entities, sorry. Now it's time to creating here the login pages. So same thing as a sign up, you just have the two thing, email and the passwords. So what I can do, we simply going to copying here the same code from here. Just need to do some changes on here. So we can simply going to copy it from here. We can simply paste it to here. And in the case of email, we can simply going to give it here those value. So at least we can copying here the same thing. We can just removing here this one's not like that. So let's copy this one. We can simply could paste it to here in the case of login, because it just had the two things, passwords as well. Okay, now let's save it. And if I go on here, okay, anything wrong? So console. So okay, anything wrong? Let's see. So reference user state is not defined. So you need to also import it from here. The same thing, it's needed. You can copy and you can paste it to here inside the login pages. And if I see on here now it's see the login pages. Any error? Let's see. Okay, no error. So now you can go on here, and now you can also give here the from type, it's on submit, and then you can simply going to creating here the functions called the handle submit. So you can go on here in the case of sign up, and you can simply going to copying here these things, handle submit, copy, and then you can simply going to paste it to here. Just need to changing here the register to the login. So in the case of login, what we have, we just have the email and the passwords. So email and the passwords, and then it will give the response. I mean, the login is successful like that. And then what we have the else statement, and it will navigate to the home page. So navigate to the home page. So let's say home. So if I see on here in the case of route, so let's creating here a route for the home as well. So you can copy it from here and I can paste it to here. Let's make it as the home page. So this is the home page. So we already created the home page, right? So home page like that, and you can simply go to import it from here. Let's say import here the home page from the pages of the home pages. Let's go on the login page and navigate to the home page. It will show the errors as well as the response. So it say the user registered successfully like that, okay, or user logged in successfully. Now in here we can also saving here the data in the local storage. So first let's see the toaster is here or not. Okay, toaster is not here, so we need to using the toaster as well. So let's say toaster. Okay, now it's successful. We can save it. Now let's see, anything wrong. So the request module homepage does not provide an export name default. So let's go on here, homepage. Okay, don't have anything else, right? Let's RFC homepage, and now let's reload the applications. Now you can see the login. Now let's log in the applications. Let's say Chando. Okay, we cannot type in here anything else. Login page from data name. Okay, not name. It's just the email and the passwords. So we have the email below from data name. It's not a name. It's the email and it's the password. So let's say password. Let's save it now. Now we can type here. Let's say Chando at the rate of gmail.com, and let's give it here some wrong password. Let's click on login. So all fields are required. Let's say if I go inside that, it's all field as required, but why? Okay, it's the name. Okay, you need to have the email and the passwords. That's my bad because you copying the code, right? That's why you can save it this out. Now let's click on login. So you can see invalid email or passwords. That's been it's the wrong email or passwords. Now let's give it here 1 2 3 4 5 6 and click on login. You can see invalid email and passwords. So unfortunately I forget the passwords. So 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Let's click on 7. User logged in successfully. Now you can see the home page. It will redirect you to the home page. Cool. That's when you can see that we can see the how we can do the login, how can you do the sign up. Now it's time to saving here our JWT token so that you can also see uh, you can using here the protected route as well as to also do the logout. So you log into the applications. If I simply go into same login, you can see that you can also log in, and you can also access here the home page. You can see you can also access the home page without doing any login. So also you don't have any logout page, so that when the user logout, and you can simply directly to go to the login pages, and when the user is authenticated, it can fetch the home page except not. Okay, so this is called the protected route. You're also creating this out, and also you're also creating here on logout buttons. So we're going to creating this logout button using the context API. So let's go on here and try to creating here the logout button first, and after that you're going to creating here the all of the functionality just like product page that you can see in the layers. Now let's implementing the logout functionality as well as we're going to using the context API so that you can access the variable from globally. Okay, so let's create a folder inside the source. So let's create a folder called context, and inside this context folder I'm simply going to creating here a file called auth.jsx. And then first I'm going to importing here the use state. So let's say import the use state. So let's say use state, and then I'm going to importing here the use context. Using this use context we can create in the context, and the create context we can creating the context. Now let's creating here a context. So let's create the context. Let's const let's say auth context is equal to auth context is equal to create context. So you're already creating here the context. Now it's also creating here one providers, because you're going to using here this auth context in case of authentications as well as you can do the login, and you can also saving here the user data. It can be users or it can be the JWT tokens. So what I can do is simply creating here a function called the auth provider. So let's say auth provider, and then inside that we're simply going to create callback functions, and then we are going to creating here one state for the auth and the set auth. So it's the state, let's say use state, and inside that we're simply going to give it here the user. So user should be the null, and the token is also the empty string, because token is in string itself. And after that you're going to returning here our provider context. Let's say return. So we're going to using here the auth context dot provider, and inside this provider we can passing here the value as the auth and the set auth, so that you can access it from any here. So and then simply going to closing this out. So let's say auth context. Okay, auth context dot provider. That's it. So auth context to provider that it have the value, and here passing here the auth and the set auth. Okay, it's not like that. It should be inside the bracket. Let's auth and the set auth. Set auth. We're simply going to returning here the value on here. Okay. So anything wrong? So JS11 auth context provider has no corresponding closing tag. Okay. We having okay because the closing text not here, so you need to give it the closing text. Now it's good. Now inside that you simply going to passing here all of the childrens. So you're taking all of the children from here. So let's say children. That's mean see context API. It's nothing but creating the context so that you can access the variable from here. I mean globally. So it's also wrapping here the parent container, or you can say the parent component, and inside this parent component we have all our child parent component. So it's also wrapping here this with the full of the application so that you can also access it from in here. So it's also passing here. So let's say we can simply going to give it here the children. So let's say children, yeah, and then we're simply going to creating here on custom hook. So let's get a custom hook. Let's const use auth. I just make it as use auth as my hook name, and then I'm simply going to using here this use context. So use context, and inside this context we're simply going to passing here this auth context. I mean this is the auth context that we created here. Okay, and after that you're simply going to export it. So let's export here that we export here the use auth. So let's use auth and the auth providers. That's it. Now that's our context is ready. In our context API is ready. So now we can simply wrapping this out with our applications. I mean the main.jsx. Okay, in the main.jsx you already covered with the browser routers. Now we have to cover with the auth providers. So let's import here. Let's import the auth provider, and you're going to wrapping this out with auth provider. So let's say auth provider, and inside that I'm going to give it here our browser router and the applications. So let's cut it down, and I'm going to patch it here. It's not needed at all because it's already running. So now format the documents. Now anything else? Anything wrong? Okay, nothing else here. You can removing this out. Let's save it, and now go to applications, and this our application is no errors. Okay, now you can simply going to go inside our login page or the sign up page. First go on the login page because it is storing here the JWT tokens. So you can simply going to access it. So let's go on the home page, and let's see how can you access it from here. So in the home page we first imported here the use auth, because we already creating here the actually creating the custom hook. So let's say use auth. So let's use auth from the context.auth, and then you simply going to destructure them. Let's say const, and then you have the auth and the set auth. Let's destructure it, and you can using here this use auth. Now you can simply going to showing this out. So you can showing this out in the JSX element. So we can using here let's say JSONs.stringify, and inside there you can give it to the auth, and you give it to the null, and you give it to the for. Okay, let's see. So you can see user is null and token is also null. That means we can successfully accessing here the auth.jsx element. I mean the variable from globally, right? You can see here users and token is nothing but the null. So if I just set it here, let's say token is nothing but let's say this one token, and it will automatically changes on here. Okay, you can see automatically changes on here, but it's also taking the token from the login pages. Then you can show it inside the home pages, right? Now let's go inside the login pages, and let's import here the use auth. So I'm going to importing here the use auth first, use auth, and then I'm going to creating here the use auth. So let's say destructure them. Let's say auth, and the set auth is equal to use auth. Right now, in the case of login, when the user actually login, we're simply going to storing it here in the not actually we're going to setting this setting the value of the tokens uh, in our use auth. I mean in our context API. So we're simply going to store it. Let's say set auth, set auth, and inside this set auth, we're simply going to store it here. Let's say taking in all of the value from previous value for the auth, and then we are going to give it here user as a name. So in it also you structure them, right? So let's destructure them first. So let's say const, we destructure them. Let's say first success, then you have the message, we have the tokens, and you have the name. So token name is nothing but JWT token. In the case of uh, in the case of the backend applications, I just opening the front end part, okay, in case because I stopped recording and recorded again. So it's better you can opening the backend side as well. Okay, later on we actually show it, but in the case of backend, we just make the token name as a JWT tokens, and then you give it here the errors. It's nothing but the variable name, right? It's coming from the sponsor data. Now you can simply go using here user as a name, and token is nothing but my JWT token. So let's say JWT tokens. So now we're simply going to save it and go on here. Now reload it. Now you can see you cannot see anything else. If I go on the login page, let's say 7.3, let's say login page, and if I log in here, let's say Chando at the rate of gmail.com, and let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, click on login, and you can see user logged in successfully. You can also see that the username is Chandadar and is the tokens. Okay, I mean the JWT token. Now you can using here this JWT token in order to do the logout, because logout means just removing the JWT tokens from the data, right? As well as we can also patching the product, because when you fetch the products, you also do the validations, right? So if I reloading this one, you can see it gone. Null and tokens, that means not a store it, to store it inside some here. Okay, so if I go inside this consoles, so if I go inside this network, if I go inside this memory and the applications, you can see here user logged in success is the previous one, because I already running this application first time, sorry, before. So that's why this actually GLB token and the user information is actually uh, saved on here. It's saved it inside a local storage. That's when it also save it inside a local storage, the value. Okay, so let's go on here, and now let's save it. Let's say we're using the local storage dot set item, and then inside that you're going to give it the auth as the name, and then you're going to stringify these ones, json.stringify, and inside this stringify we're going to give it here my response.data. So let's say response.data. Okay, that's it. Now our data is saved inside the local storage. Now if I save it and if I go to the application again, and let's make it to the login, and if I make it, let's say Chando at the rate of gmail.com, and I'll just give it the password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Let's click on login. Now you can see user logged in successfully, and also the users and the tokens. And if I reloading this one, it's gone, but the token is saved inside our local storage. You can say local storage. So that's when you saved it inside local storage, right? You can see Chandu at the rate of gmail.com. Okay, so user logged in successfully. Now we can simply going to, what I can do is simply going to also get it from this local storage, and you can also show it inside our home, right? That's our home, right? So what I can do is simply going to go inside our home page. So go our home page, and we can simply going to uh, actually first creating here the logout statement, and after that you simply going to store it here uh, in our local storage, and you can simply going to get in this out. Okay, so we can simply go into implementing here this logout functionality. So for that we are going to uh, creating here a button. So let's creating here a button. In here you can create the button. So let's say button. So let's say button. Okay, button. And inside this button we can simply format this out. inside this button, you can give it here one function name so that you can also log out the users. Say in here, if I see spec, if I see on here, you can see it store it inside the applications. It also removing this one. So when it's removed, that's when user is locked out, right? But it also store the value in our users. So that's why it also changes something inside our uh, in our context API. So what I can do is simply going to go in auth.js first. Then after that, you're going to creating the logger buttons. Let's go inside this auth.jsx, and then you're going to importing here this use effect, because you need to when the application is loaded, it will automatically calling here these functions. So you can simply going to use the use effect, and you can person the data from our local storage. So we can simply going to using here these ones. Let's say use effect. So use effect, and then you have the callback functions, and then we are going to take it the data from the local storage. That's a local storage dot get item, and our item name is nothing but the auth, and this is my data. So let's say const data, and after that, if the data is coming, so let's say if the data is coming, we can simply going to pressing this one. Why? Because it's not showing up, right? User is null. It shows that you are going to actually get the data from the local storage, and you're going to show it inside our home pages. So data. Now let's using here variable called parse data. Let's say parse data, and then we can using here JSON dot parse, because this is a JSON data. Parse the data, and then you can simply going to setting the auth. So let's say set auth. So in the set auth, we are going to saving here the value, because use effect is working when the application is loaded. It will first calling this one. Okay, so we're simply going to give it here. Let's say we're taking the previous value, and then inside the user we're going to using the parse data. So let's say parse data dot name, and in the case of token, we are going to using the parse data dot JWT tokens. Now let's save it, and now if I go inside the applications, not like that, you can see here now it loaded. If I reload it, it's automatically loaded. That's when when the application is reloaded, it will get in the data. Okay, now we have the JWT token, so you have the username. We can simply going to show it inside the homepage, as well as you can do the authentications for the showing here the product pages, because in the case of product pages, we have the middlewares for authentications, right? Now it having some problem. Okay, maximum update depth success, that's when it also use here the same thing. So let's use here this one, and in here we can simply go to passing here the auth, because auth is needed. But if I save it, yep, data is coming, but it having some problem in the case of maximum update depth access. So you can also removing this one. You can using here the ESLint disable next line. Okay, let's say next line, because it is calling here the functions every time. Okay, so now let's reload it. It's not gone. It's a ESLint. It's also removing here this auth from here. ESLint disable next line. Now if I see this one, now you can see it's gone. Yes, it's affected for the CPU or GPU, because it's taking time as well as it's taking the memories. That's why it's better you can disable the next line, because use effect is calling each and every time in the set auth. Okay, it started getting the data every time. Now we have our data, and we can also now simply log out that. Okay, so what I can do, we can simply going to show the data. So now you can simply going to creating here functions for log out the log out to the users. So let's creating functions called const handle logout. Let's say handle logout, and then we have in these ones we having to creating here the set auth. Let's say set auth, and we can simply going to give it to here the auth. So let's say dot auth, and then you can using here user is equal to null, and the token is equal to blank, right? And after that, you're going to removing the local storage. Let's say local storage dot remove item. Okay, it's simply going to removing the auth, right? So you can save it, and you can also use here the navigations in the case of here. So if you are actually using here the nav link, so you can also automatically actually navigate from the one page to another page. You just don't need to actually using here this button tag. So you can now using here this handle uh, logout in your button. So you can using here the nav link. Let's start up using here the button. So let's get the nav link first, so that you can also navigate. You don't need to using the use navigate hook. So let's say navigate, I mean nav link, sorry. And inside this nav link, we're simply going to give it here the button name called logout. And in the case of nav link, how the user is logout is directly go to inside the login page. So it should be the login page, right? Now let's save it. Now let's go on here, and you can see logout button, right? So anything wrong? So let's go on the consoles. Let's delete it. Anything wrong? No wrong. If I clicking on the logout, you can see here 404 page not found. Okay, the problem actually happening because it should be the login like that. Okay, so let's reload it. Okay, the home page first. Home page. So you can see token. If I go into the applications, you can see here that's our token. And if I click on logout, you can see here it is coming inside its login pages, but nothing is happened because you're not calling the function yet. So to call the functions, so we can using here the on click. That's on click, and you can using here this hand and logout. Okay, let's save it now. Now let's go on the home page again because it is still login. And now if you click on logout, you can see it automatically clear the auth. Okay, that's when user is unable to log in here. Okay, so user need to log in here. Chandudar, Chandu, let's add rate of gmail.com. And if I give it a password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and if I click on here, you can see we can log in here. Okay, that's our username and the tokens. But here was a problem then. See, if I simply going to log out, and if I going to using here this home, you can see I also access the home page. Okay, it is not a right case. If the user don't have any permission, he's unable to access the home page, right? So you need to also creating here one private route for that. Just you know to making this home page as a private route. So what I can do, we can simply go to creating here a folder called routes, so that you can also creating here our private routes. So let's say routes, and you can simply going to change it inside our app.jsx file. So in the routes, we can creating here the file name called private route. Let's create it. Let's say private route .jsx. Okay. So first you're going to import it here the use auth. So use auth, because it's needed into checking here the user is authenticated or not. And after that, you need to also import here the use effect. So let's say use effect, and also the use state. Let's say use state, as well as also you need to import here the xuse. Let's say import here the xuse from xuse. Why xuse? Because if I see the backend code, in our backend code we have one page called the product route where you can see we can access the product. Okay, so it also have the enable authentications, I mean ensure authentications. That means if the user is authenticated, is able to access the product pages. In the home pages, you simply going to store, I mean we're going to show here the product pages. Okay, so what I can do is simply going to creating here a function. So let's make it as export default, just making default exported, and creating here the functions calls the private route. Let's say private route. So inside that, what I can do is simply going to creating here a const of OK, and the set OK is equal to use state as a false. And then we are going to creating here const auth, the set auth is equal to use auth. So then you can also accessing here the use auth. Now we're simply going to accessing here the API for the product pages, so that we can actually make the permission to the users. If the product is if the user is authenticated, he is able to access the product pages. So let's save it first, and I'm going to opening here the backend folder as well in the BS code, because it's quite annoying. Just I open the Frontend folders. Let's open it. Okay, so I'm opening it here. So you have the backend file as well. If I go inside this backend, we have the controller, we have the routes. So in the case of product routes, you can see it's nothing but a route which will have in the ensure authenticated. That means if the user is authenticated, he's able to accessing the product. Okay, and I'm going to show it inside the home pages. And then what we having the index.js. Inside it we having this underscore product. Okay, so going to calling this out using the xuse. So you need to calling here for every time. So let's say use effect. You're going to using the use effect, and then inside that we're simply going to using here the you're going to using here the xuse library. So you can checking first, I mean for the authentication check. So let's checking here the auth check is equal to await. We need to making this function is a async functions. So we can making here this function as async function. Let's say async, and then we simply going to make it callback functions, and then we can simply going to taking the response from our product pages. So we're going to using here const response is equal to await. We're going to using here xuse.get, because this is the get request. If you see that it is a get request, you can see. So to give it here the link, so it should be the http. It's http, and you have the local storage. You can give it here 8080 because port number is 8080, and you have the products. So we have the products. Okay, so this is the link, nothing but. And after that, what I can do is also give it here on headers, because in the products it also have the ensure authenticated. So to also add it here the headers for the authentications. Now let's say headers. Okay, headers and headers. Okay, so in the case of headers, it's not like that. So you need to give it here inside a curly bracket, right? So let's say headers is equal to authorizations. So you need to give it here like that, not like that actually. Authorizations is equal to auth.tokens. So let's say auth.tokens. See, if the auth is not valid, it will not checking this out. If it's first checking the auth, and after that it will collect the tokens like that. Okay, now so we're having this xuse. Let's format the document first. So we're having these ones. Now if the response is gathered, so if the response status is 200, we're just making the set okay the true, because we're simply going to give it here the response of 200, and then just make the set okay is equal to true. That's when user is authenticated. And after that we're going to show, I mean console.log. We are going to using it here the response.data, and otherwise you're going to making here this set okay to the false. So let's say set okay to the false, and then you can simply going to show here the console.log of the response data, or you can also use here the is the errors, right? Now we're simply going to using here the use auth. So in here else tag, this is the auth check, and in here is checking here that if the auth token is valid or not. Let's say if the auth token is the valid. Okay, not like that actually. Auth token dot valid, and then we can simply going to calling here this auth check. This auth check functions, I mean these functions. And after that, inside that is simply going to passing this out. So in here, so the auth check, and then you have these ones, and then we can give it here the auth, and we can give it here the token. So let's say give it here auth dot tokens, like that. Okay, so it should be coming up with the bracket. So it's not like that actually. So I need to copy this out and I need to give it to here. So it's nothing but the semicolons. You need to give it to the comma, the auth token. Cool. Now you're going to returning here the OK as well as one spinner. So what I can do, let's say return here. Let's return here if it is OK, and then you're going to using here the outlet. So let's say outlet. That outlet means we can using here the actually we can using here any kind of outlet. It can be the home page or the product pages. So we're going to import it here. Let's import here the outlet. Oh, not like that. Outlet from the React router DOM, because it already available inside this React router DOM. So let's outlet from React router DOM. So it also store it inside the curly brackets. Outlet. Okay, this one's anything wrong? Okay, yes, this one outlet, and then we can simply continue using this one. Okay, so outlet. Otherwise, we can say that's not authorized, or you can also showing here one spinner, and you can simply go into actually redirect it to the login pages. So you can say that spinner, or let's say not authorized. In the case later on, you actually give it here one spinners, and after that we're simply going to go inside the app.jsx, because in the app.jsx we have the routes, and it also import here the private route. So let's import here the private route. Let's import here the private route is the private route, and then you're going to using it here in our routes. So our private route is nothing but my home page. So we can simply go into removing this from here. You can also creating here the code on here. So first we're going to creating here the routes. So let's say not like that, routes, not route, sorry. And in the case of path, we are going to give it here the home. And in the case of element, we're going to give it here the private route. So let's give it the private route, this private route. So to give it here in the case of tag. So tag private route, and inside this routes we are going to give it here, inside this route you're going to give it here the all of the accessible route. Let's say in my home page we have the product page, we have the any other page it can be, right? But in our application you just have the single page, nothing but the home page. So we're going to give it here the route. So let's say routes, and path is nothing but home page. Okay, so you need to give it the home as well. So let's say home, and you're going to format documents. Now let's save it, and now if I go inside the applications, so you can see user is null and connection error. Yep, this site can be reached. Let's go on here, the backend server, backend is running. Okay, you need to also run in the application because we opening it here. Let's say front end. Okay, not like that, cd front end, and we can send npm run that, because it stopped the server before, right? So that's why. Now if I go on here and if I reload the applications, so let's do the site, it's running. So you can see the home page. If I go into this inspect and consoles, anything wrong? Okay, first time it actually taking time. Okay, if I go into this login first, let's go on the login. Okay, you can say not authorized. Okay, because you are not logging it yet, and in our applications we don't have any auth, right? So if I log in here, so let's say chando@gmail.com, we're going to, let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and if you click on login and you have the auth, it's also say they're not authorized. So the problem actually happening just because of in our index.js, it's nothing but called product. But in the case of private route, we have the products. So you can remove the s from here. Otherwise, you can also change this inside your index.js file. So let's make it product in here. And after that, let's go on the applications. Now you can see here Chandotar, and we also have the tokens. Okay, that you can see. So if I click on logout, it will delete it from here. And if I give it here, let's say Chandu, same thing, let's say at the rate of gmail.com. And if I give it my password, let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7, and if I click on login, then you can see user logged in successfully, as well as you can see the token, right? But let's say I'm going to just give it here, I'm going to log out here, and I am trying to access in the home page right now. You can see that not authorized. That's mean I am unable to access the home page right now. Okay, so what I can do, you can also creating here on spinner, instead of just showing here this not authorized, you can also creating here one element for the spinners. So let's creating this out. So I'm going to go inside pages, and I'm going to creating here a file called spinner.jsx. And after that, I'm simply going to using here this rfce, and I'm going to implementing a spinner. So it's nothing but the simple front-end code. I'm just writing this out, and I'll back again. So designing here the spinner is just having one text call redirected in 5 seconds, and please wait while we redirect it to you. So we can simply going to using this one inside our private route. So we simply going to import it. Let's import here the spinner. Let's say spinner, and then we're going to using here this spinner. Okay, so let's using it here. So you can using here, let's say spinner. Okay, this one's cool. Now if I save it, and if I go on here, you can see here redirected in 5 seconds, but it not redirected yet, right? So not also creating here one time interval so that it can also redirect it to the home page or the login page if the user is not authorized. So let's go on here and try to implementing this one inside our spinner. So first what I can do is simply going to creating here a variable for the counting. So let's say count const count and the set count, and you can simply going to give it here as the use state of the, let's say, 5 seconds. Okay, and we are going to replacing this 5 with the count. So inside the JSX element, and we just give it to the count, I mean the variable name. And after that, what I can do, we're simply going to creating here a state for creating here one navigation so that you can also navigate from the spinner to the login page. So let's say import the use navigations. So use navigations, use navigate, and it's simply going to import it and creating here one instance of that. So let's say navigate, and you can using here this use navigate functions. Okay, now high end, it will the 5 second is going to end, it will automatically redirect it to the login page. So I'm going to using here the use effect because you need to use it while the application is loaded. We can using here this use effect, and after that we're simply going to creating here a callback function, and inside this callback function we can simply going to creating here one interval. Okay, so we need to using this one this callback functions. So not like that actually, गलती हो जाते बस use effect, and then you having this one, we have the callback functions. Okay, this one's now you're going to set it here one interval. Let's say set interval, and inside this interval you need to give it here how many second you can give. Let's say 2000. Okay, there's the interval, or you can also give it here other 1000 as well. So let's give it here 1000 so that it look fast. And inside a set interval we are going to give it here the set count. So let's say set count is equal to previous count, and previous count minus 1, or you can also using here one variable for that. You can using here like that. Let's say current, let's say current count, I mean the count of the current. It's a current count, and after that you can simply go into minus them, or you can also using here this minus minus like that. Okay, instead of using -1, you can also using here this minus minus. Okay, it's up to you. Then we simply checking that if the count is 0, so if the count is equal to 0, if the count is equal to 0, then we are going to navigate to the login page. Let's say navigate to the login page. Let's say login page. Okay, so now what I can do, we are going to returning here the clean interval. Let's say return a functions of clear interval, because you're not also calling here the function, right? Now in this case we are going to returning here the count and the navigate. Let's say count and the navigate. That's it. Okay, so now if I save it and if I go on here, so home page, anything wrong, let's go on inspect and console. So user state is not defined, and it's also using here the user state because you already use it. Let's say use state. Let's save it now. Now you can see here redirected in the 5 seconds. You can see 1 to 3 like that. Okay, so if I am going to give it here again home page with authorize, you can see redirected in 4 seconds to, okay, like that. Okay, you can also give it here the 2000s. If you give it to 2000, then you can see, just to wait, the home page. Let's say home page 5. Okay, 4, slowly see 2 and gone. Okay, now you can see the login pages that you can see on here. Okay, so you can also increment. Okay, minus. I hope so it will increment it for the 2 times. I don't know why, but it's, yeah, it's working. Okay, so we can see that we can also access it. So without the info, we unable to log in. So if the user is logging, he can access the home page. Now let's try to log in on here. So let's make it 2000. Yep, 2000s. So let's give it here chandu@gmail.com, and then I'm going to give it here 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, not 8, 7, just only. Login, user logged in successfully. Now we have the user and the token. Now if I just go on here and if I go to type here the localhost 513, you can see here it will redirect it to the login page again. Okay, that's one problem. So you need to also handle in this out. See, if I because I am on here, if I just give it here the single one, so it should be go inside the home page, right? But it's coming inside the login page. Why? Just because of in the route, in the case of route, we actually give it here initial route as the login page. I mean the login page. So you need to make it as a home page. So now let's make it say home page. And if I go on here and if I reload it, and if I just give it here this one, you can see directly go to the home page. Now if I log out and if I try to give it here these ones, so you can see here redirected in the 5 chain and try to go inside the login page now. Okay, that's mean if you are unauthorized, you are unable to access the home page. Okay, cool, right? So you can also testing on here. That's a localhost 513. See, it will redirect it to the login page because you are unauthorized person, right? Cool. Now we're simply going to designing here the fetch product. I mean, we're going to fetching the product from the our product pages, because if I see the product router, so you have the product number 1 and the product number 2. We need to also collecting it from here. So let's try to access it. So I just going to changing something on here in case of product. I mean, just I'm going to adding here some name of the product, as well as I'm going to add some images and the prices as well. So what I can do, I am simply going to replacing it with some real-time data with the images, so that it's look cool that you can see in the demo video, right? So I just added here some kind of real-time data, which are having the name, price, images as well. You can see images and also prices. So we're going to using this one here to access it from here. Yes, you can also access it from the MongoDB database. Just for anxiety, I mean that how can you do that? I just for actually add it inside the backend. Okay, but you can also add it in the MongoDB server. You can access it from here just for testing purposes. Okay, now let's go inside this our home page, and then inside this home page you're going to creating here a function so that you can also show the products. So for that, what I can do, we are going to using here a functions called fetch project. Say const fetch project. Let's say fetch FAT. See, okay, fetch product. So we can say the products, not like that. And then it's simply creating here the async function. It's not needed at all. Async, yep, async is needed because you're going to take in the data from the backend server. And after that, what I can do is simply going to creating here a try and catch block. So let's say try and catch, and inside this catch block, you're going to show here the error. Let's say console.log, and then we can simply going to give it to here the errors. Okay, let's say error, or you can say that error fetching products. Okay, it's error fetching products. Let's say fetching products and the errors in on here. Now, in the case of try block, we're simply going to take in the response from our product pages. So our product page is nothing but, let's get in here a variable called const response, and you're going to using here this 8081, and this is nothing but the product. And as well as in the case of authorization, so you're going to give it here the tokens, because our token is saved inside our auth, right? So you can give it to here. So we can give it. So let's try to give it to here. So we have the headers. So we have the headers, right? We have the authorizations, and you have the auth tokens that you also do inside our private route that you can see, okay, in the auth check, because it will every time it will checking this out, right? Now let's go to the home page. Authorization is nothing but the headers, and then we can simply go into using it. So we can also copy it from here because the same thing on here. But instead of set, okay, we're simply going to give it the set product. Let's try to typing this out. Don't be lazy much. So inside the header we have in these ones, and here we can say that if the response dot status of 200, okay, it should be equal to, we are going to set the product because it also changes state. So it also taking one use state. Let's say const product and a set product. Let's say use state, and then we're simply going to make it as a empty, or you can also give it here one empty array because the data is coming in the from array, that's why. And you can give it here set product, and inside this set product we are going to give it here, it's better you can make it the products because multiple number of product is coming on here. You can change it inside your server, but I don't think that I need to changing this out. It's your job to change things out. Okay, set products, and inside that you're going to give it a response.data, and then you can see the console.log. We are going to show the data in the form of JSON stringify. So stringify response data is equal to null, like that. So now we are going to call in these functions in here, so you can using this out. So instead of using this stringify this one, we can show here the first product, this method. So we can using here inside the deep tag. So what I can do, we can simply go into using here, let's say another deep tag, or let's say to using this one inside that. Okay, instead of using here this users and the tokens, so we can using here the products dot map, and inside that we are going to give it here the products and the index. So let's give it here products and the index, and then you have one callback functions. So inside these functions we're simply going to give it here one key first, because you need to also give it here one key. So inside the h1 tag we are going to showing here the products dot name, so that it will show the name, and you can also show the images as well in here, but you need to also checking the length of the product. Let's say product dot length. If the length is equal to greater than 0 and 10, and you're simply going to mapping here the products with the index number, because you need to also give it here one key. So where you can give it to here, let's say key, not like that. You need to also creating here an index of that. So let's creating here one div, and inside this div you're going to give it here the key. So let's make it as a div, and inside this div I'm going to give it here this one, and I am simply going to making the key inside our div. So let's say key is nothing but our index is coming on here. Okay, so let's save it, and now go on here and now log in the from, let's say chandu@gmail.com, and let's say 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Now let's click on login, and user logged in successfully. Now you can see logout, but our product is not showing up. Let's go on here, inspect and console. So many error. This could be due to syntax error in the importing non-existing module. Yep, and it also import here the Axios, right? So let's import here the Axios from Axios. Now let's save it and go on here. And this could be due to syntax error on the importing non-existing module. Let's try to close it. Now reload the applications. Yep, you can see here we have our data, mobile phone, laptop, but the problem is data is not showing up on here. Sorry, my bad actually, just because of actually using here these the curly brackets, because in the case of function you need to using the parentheses, that's not the problem. As well as I am not actually calling here this fetch product. That's also one problem. So I need to calling this out. So I can calling this out inside the use effect. Let's say use effect. So inside this use effect, I'm going to calling this ones. I'm going to calling here this fetch product functions. So on here, I'm going to calling here this fetch product functions. Now let's see, because I'm creating the function, but I am not calling it yet. There's a problem, but now you can see it is loading all of the data that you can see on here. Okay, it is loading mobile phones, laptop, smartwatch, everything. It will actually accessing them. Okay, and it also give it here one blank, otherwise it will running, that you can see. Inspect. Now I hope it has stopped. Yeah, now it has stopped because it executing the every time because you're not adding anything else. Now you can see mobile phones, laptop, smartphone, tablet, gaming consoles, IR earbuds, smart TV, Bluetooth speaker, and the logout buttons. And then I can also showing here, let's say is2, and I can also showing here, let's say product dot price. We can also showing here the price. Okay, so let's say price and show it, and you can see the price is also showing on here. So that's it. Now we can simply go into try to designing this out more goals, also having one header, also have the logger button, and you also going to showing here the users. So how can I show the users? You can using this use auth, because in our auth you have the username as well. Now let's try to designing this out, and I will back again. So designing this out, I just added here some kind of neighbors. Also you can see here one logout button as well as the username, and also you can see here the product with the images that you can see. You can add to cart, but it's not functionable at right now. But yes, we are able to fetch the product from our backend servers. Now let's go on here and see. We just added here auth.users, because yes, we can also fetch in the user's name from here. And then we are going to add it here, this login page, the same thing. Okay, and you can using here the image tag, and inside that you give it the product.image, and you can simply kind of showing here the product in the form of grid. Okay, so that you can see, if I save it and if I go on here the applications, and if I go inside this full screen mode, that you can see how our application look like. And if I go on here in the MongoDB, and if I go into auth projects, you can see that's our database as well. You just having a two two entry. Okay, now let's go on here and try to log out from here, and then let's click on register, and let's say Mishudhar. Okay, and give it here one mail. Let's say chando12345 at the rate of gmail.com, and then I'm going to give it the passwords. Let's give it here 123 right now. Click on sign up, because the password length must be at least 4 character long. Now let's give it the password 123456. Now let's click on sign up. You can see user registered successfully. Cool. Now we can simply go into login out here. So let's say Chando. If I see in the database, you can see it will also coming on here. You can see Mishudar Chando 12345. So let's go on here. Now let's give it here 12345, and I'm going to give it here gmail.com, and I have the password 123456, and I'm going to give it here the wrong Gmail. Let's click on login. User does not exist. Let's click on here the 4, and I'm going to removing one password from here. Click on login. You can see invalid email passwords. If I give it here the actual password 3456, and if I click on login, now you can see here user logged in successfully, that you can see. Now you can see the product is available. Okay, so that's it for today now, and hope you enjoy this full tutorial. It's nothing but for the beginner as well as for the expert level. Okay, I mean, I just try to make you expert in these cases. So I hope so. Some new videos coming up soon in this series as well. So thank you and bye bye.